In SQL Server 2022, Microsoft changed the way you create SQL Server aliases, but they didn't tell you about it. Before 2022, you could use SQL Server Configuration Manager, but not any longer. Hey friends, I'm Luke, and in today's video, I'm going to show you two methods for setting up SQL Server aliases, and then we're going to walk through a scenario of using those aliases with replication. In the scenario we'll be going through today, let's say that you're asked as a DBA to configure replication between two SQL Server instances. Maybe those instances reside on a network where NetBIOS has been disabled and you have to use fully qualified domain names. Or in our case, the browser service has been disabled and you're using a named instance. If you're familiar with replication, you know that replication requires that you use the server name and instance name without the fully qualified domain name, and you can't use IP addresses. So that's where Server aliases really come in handy, so that you can define those. We'll walk through replication first without the alias, just so that you can see one of the errors that you may run into when you encounter this scenario. And then we'll do it again and set up our aliases first using a manual way, using one of the built-in tools in the Windows OS. And then the second way is we'll use Ansible playbook to set up the instances. So that may be the way you want to go if you're setting up aliases on multiple machines. We will be using the Stack Overflow database. So if you go out to the blog post, and I'll put a link down in the description, but if you go to the blog post that goes along with this video, so SRV1 is going to be our publisher, SRV2/central, but since I have the browser service disabled, I'm having to specify a port, which I've got it configured to run on port 1533. The database, this will be our publication database, Stack Overflow, and this will be our subscriber, which is Stack Overflow _central. We'll be using some of the smaller, two of the smaller tables, which will be tags, and we're just going to choose tags and post types as our tables to replicate. So let's go ahead and start our new publication. And again, I don't have aliases set up yet on this machine. I am on SRV1. We're going to choose merge replication. And then we're going to select our tables. And those tables again were tags and post types. Go ahead and click next. We're going to accept the default for most of these. Yes, I want to create the snapshot immediately. And let's go ahead and set up our security. We're just going to run our snapshot agent, or our snapshot, using the SQL Server agent service account. We're going to create the publication and then give it a name. We'll just call it merge, Stack Overflow _merge. And let's take a look and see if our snapshot is being created. It looks like it is. We're going to go ahead and open up the replication monitor. Looks like it completed. So let's go ahead and minimize that. Now we're ready to set up our subscriber. So we're going to right click on the publication and choose new subscription. Click next. Publisher, that is correct, SRV1. We're going to run all agents at the distributor, which the distributor and publisher are the same in my case, SRV1. So this is going to be a push subscription. So now we're ready to add our subscriber. So you'll notice that I can place in srv2.homelab.local, 1533. I can connect just fine. I can choose the subscription database, Stack Overflow Central. Click Next. Go ahead and click this so that we can set up our security. We're going to run SQL Server Agent Service account. Not recommended, but we're just doing this in a lab environment. For the next one, using the SQL Server login. So I want to use a SQL Server login to connect to SRV2, homelab.local 1533. And that user is going to be REPL user. That user only needs to be DB owner inside Stack Overflow Central. So it doesn't need to be SA or anything on the instance. Let's go ahead and provide those credentials. And then click Next. This is fine, run on demand only. Next, and next again, and then finish. All right, so we ran into an error. We got through the wizard, everything looked fine, but let's see what the error is. So this is saying cannot insert the value null into column name in msdb.dbo.sysjobs. Even though the wizard allowed you to use the comma, replication requires that you provide the actual server and then the instance, if it's an instance name, without the fully qualified domain name. When you're defining your subscriber, whatever you put there has to match the output of @ server name. So it must be SRV2/central, but we can't use that name because we have the browser service disabled. All right, since we ran into that error, let's go ahead and clean up that subscription. We're going to go ahead and just delete it. Yes, connect to the subscriber and delete. All right, so we've got everything back to a clean state. Before we do this again, we're going to go ahead and set up an alias. So as I said previously, you could do that using SQL Server Configuration Manager, but let me show you what happens when we try that in SQL Server 2022. So generally, you would go to SQL Server or SQL Native Client configuration. You would do it under the 32-bit and the 64-bit. You would click Alias, click New Alias. This pop-up comes up, and in previous versions, you could type in the alias name, the connection string, protocol, and server, but we're not able to provide any value there. So go ahead and cancel. You get the same results here under the 64-bit. We're going to use the CLI config tool. So again, this is the manual way. And to find the 64-bit CLI config, you'll go under C Windows System 32, CLI confg.exe, and it'll bring up this utility, SQL Server Client Network Utility. We're going to enable the TCP/IP protocol, and then we're going to go ahead and click on Alias, click Add, and then we're going to give our alias a name. Now, this will need to match the server name and the instance name. In our case, it's going to be SRV2 Central. Here for the server name, we're going to put, actually, we're going to click TCP/IP here first. We're not using named pipes. Go ahead and uncheck this dynamically determine port because we're going to be using a static port of 1533. And here you could put the IP address, and then in our case, we're just going to use the fully qualified domain name. Go ahead and click OK, apply, and then OK. Now we're going to do the same thing for the 32-bit version. So you'll find it's the same tool, but it's the 32-bit version under C Windows syswow 64. CLI config.exe. Go ahead and enable TCP/IP. Click alias, click add. Same steps that we did previously. Go ahead and click apply and then OK. Now we're going to go back into Management Studio and try to set up replication again. Before you do that, you can do a quick test just using Management Studio. So I'm going to go ahead and disconnect where I've specified the port. Click disconnect, and now I'm just going to use SRv2/central, and it's going to use that alias. So we connected just fine, and just so that you can see, I'm on SRv2 here. SQL Server browser is stopped. So if I were to try that before adding that alias, it would just time out. So now I'm connected. Now we should be able to go through and set up our subscription without any issues. So let's go ahead and add our subscriber. And this time, instead of specifying srv2.homelab.local, 1533, we're just going to use our alias name, click connect. We're going to go ahead and specify REPL user. Next, and then we're going to click finish. This time it was successful. Let's jump back into Replication Monitor. Go ahead and refresh. Go to all subscriptions. And we're going to go ahead and try to start synchronizing. You can hit F5 here to refresh. So to get there, I just double clicked here. It's already synchronized because we used small tables. And let's go see if our tables are here. And they are post types and tags. Go ahead and check for any failed jobs. And we don't have any. So that's one way to add an alias to support setting up replication. Now, the aliases have a lot of other uses. For instance, if you've got client machines or other people on your DBA team are using Management Studio locally and the browser service is disabled and you don't want to have to manage the ports and everything on those machines, then you can set up aliases there as well. And then some applications could use that if the alias was set up locally on those machines. So that's the manual way to do it. Let's go ahead and before I jump into Ansible, I do want to refresh Configuration Manager and just show you that you can see any aliases that are set up on the machine still using Configuration Manager. You just can't create them and you can't modify it. All right, so the first thing we need to do is just go ahead and remove those aliases. So we do that using the same tool. Do it for the 64-bit or the 32-bit and the 64-bit. All right, so those are gone. If I disconnect from SRv2 Central here, and I try to connect again, I can't. It's going to time out. So I'm going to switch over to SRv3, which is my Ansible controller. And you'll see, and I'll put a link to the playbook as well, but I've just created just a quick playbook _add alias. and then playbook_DSC resources is one that I use just to download and place the PowerShell DSC modules over on the client machines that I want to manage. So the playbook add alias will first download and extract the DSC resources. And then next it will actually, the task is to set up the SQL Server alias. So you can modify the, if you're familiar with Ansible, you can modify this playbook to where you can use variables instead of hard coding it in here, but this is just a quick example. So the first step, we're going to copy DSC modules to target, which is going to be SRV2. And then the destination where we're going to place those modules is in the C program files, Windows PowerShell modules folder. And then we're copying over only the SQL Server DSC modules. Next, we're actually going to create the alias. We're going to do that by calling ansible.win_DSC, which is an Ansible module that allows you to use PowerShell desired state configuration. The resource name is SQL alias. This is the alias we're going to create. Notice we've got to escape that backslash because it is a reserved character here. The server name that alias is going to point to is srv2 homelab.local. Protocol is going to be TCP, and the port is 1533. We're not going to use a dynamic port, and we're going to ensure that this alias is present. So if we change this to, we can change this to where we can remove the alias as well. So we would just put absent there. So let's go ahead and jump into Ubuntu, and I'm using WSL here on a Windows machine with Ubuntu installed. I've got other YouTube videos. If you want to see how to set those up, just check the Getting Started with Ansible playlist or Ansible for DBAs playlist. So I'm going to use Ansible-playbook, and then this is the playbook name, playbook_add alias. I'm going to use my domain credentials. Since the inventory file that I use has multiple machines in it, I'm going to go ahead and limit the machines to SRV1. So that should only run this playbook against this machine. And then you can see those hosts defined here under SQL servers. So let's go ahead and run it and see what happens. And this is going to add both the 64 and 32-bit alias. And as you can see, it would be much faster to do it this way if you were managing multiple machines and needed to create an alias on those, or if you wanted to create a set of aliases on all new SQL servers that you were configuring. So it looks like everything was successful. Let's go switch back over to SRV1 and verify. You can see that it finally timed out, but this time should connect just fine, and it did. And we can verify that those aliases are back by just jumping either in Configuration Manager or back in our CLI config tool or the SQL Server client network utility alias, and we can see it's there. So if you want more information on aliases, you can go out to Microsoft's website, alias SQL Server Configuration Manager. This just shows that they have not updated their documentation, and it still states that you can use SQL Server Configuration Manager to configure aliases. If you found this useful, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching.